Hello, this is Dr. Andrew Kaufman, and welcome to Medicamentum Authentica. Today, we're going to continue our series in discussing the law with a new guest. And so I'm proud to have here today Pastor of the Way, whose platform is known as Basilikos Nomos. And there will be links in the show notes below so you can check him out directly. And a pastor has become a teacher and mentor of mine over the past several months, and he approaches the material in a very disciplined and scholarly way, and has been able to find some clear evidence in the law answering some fundamental and foundational questions about who we are and how we can interact with the legal and commerce systems. So, Pastor has a number of ways that he does teaching. He puts out material on public platforms, on YouTube and others. He also has courses that you can enroll in with excellent materials. And he has private membership groups where you can get additional access to educational materials and discussion forums, as well as doing private consultation. So there are many ways to engage with this material. So welcome to the podcast, Pastor.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Andrew, yeah, he is one of my members. So, it must be saying something when the host likes what I do. So,
Well, I think my audience knows that I generally apply a high degree of scrutiny and discernment to the sources of information. So it does at least mean something to them that I am sharing your information as a valid resource. But I was wondering, Pastor, because, of course, the quality of the information you present itself will determine the value that it has, and everyone should certainly judge for themselves. But I thought it would be interesting to, as a way to establish some context, is to describe to the listeners how you came to study the law and develop your depth of knowledge and application.
well, before we started, you was talking about my dad, and some of the people in my membership group, they've actually got to speak to my dad, and he spent a lot of time studying just one certain subject, everybody's favorite thing, taxes. So he had some experiences with that, and I didn't listen. I was young. So when it came my turn, because life deals you a hand, and I had to fight the state for 7 years in a court battle, and they were not letting go of nothing, no matter what I did. And I was reading court cases. Now, my time is very limited because I drive a truck for a living. And in my spare time, I was studying. I've read a lot of court cases. I've made a lot of discoveries. And it was like no matter what I did, they wasn't accepting anything. And it never really made sense to me why in the early days. But it was when I finally did the GSA bonds, that's when they changed their tune. Now, some people may know what that is, some people may not know, but that's for another discussion. All I can say is, did I do them 100% right? No, didn't know that at the time, left out some things, didn't send them to every party I was supposed to. I missed one party. Um, but they changed their tune. And that's when I started saying, wait a minute, the system works a certain way and it's not what we think.
So it sounds like perhaps even partly by accident or just simply by curiosity and exploration, you exposed a vulnerability and they had to protect themselves and start following the rules in a different way. Essentially, sounds like what you're
Well,
describing.
no, it wasn't really a vulnerability. One of the things I've come to the realization of is everything people think about the system, it is actually the opposite. It literally is the opposite of what people think. Okay. For example, you got the Declaration of Independence says, we the people of the United States, and people think that is them. They never look at the state constitution that says, we the people of the state of. Okay. So they think they are one of the we the people of the United States when I've got court cases that I have found back near, not to the exact day of the founding. I mean, the first Supreme Court case was Chisholm v. Georgia. And Chisholm v. Georgia talks about the state being an artificial person and that the citizens of the state are sovereign. And people don't like that term. The courts get real iffy on that term. And
The term citizen or the term sovereign?
sovereign, okay, they don't like that term. They honor it because the state declares themselves to be sovereign on a certain level, and they are. But that goes into some of the stuff I teach. When you start understanding that, like agency, you start understanding where the sovereignty really lies and why they are. But we've heard the old saying, public and private do not mix. And people don't understand the depth of that phrase. And because of me being a believer in Christ and studying the Bible, I teach things based on the law and relate it to biblical principles. Okay. Like, for example, Jesus said the God of this world is Satan or the devil. And people will say, well, there's only one God. Really? Go read Psalms 82. There's actually many gods, but there's only one true creator. And you get into all of that with Genesis 6, Genesis 11, Psalms 82. And in John, when Jesus said, ye are gods, people misapply that and think he's talking about man. No, he's not talking about man. They take things out of context. So Satan cannot create. All he can do is emulate or mirror. So God created man, Satan created persons. And just look at the Fourth Amendment. The first clause of the Fourth Amendment states the right of the people, that's the men and women, to be secure in their persons, the legal fiction. And it says persons, plural. How many persons can you create? I
Well, I
mean,
think an infinite number.
yes, an infinite number. So,
So, just to
so
clarify,
they
because you've made
go
a
ahead.
number of points here, and I think you've definitely illustrated nicely the biblical correlations. And I think we all know that much of the law is based upon the Bible. But what you were saying about we the people in the Declaration of Independence, so can you just explain in simple terms exactly who we the people are and who are, you and I in relation to that?
We, the people of the United States, when you look at the organic documents, let's call it that, you have the Declaration. The proper title of it is called a Declaration. I have a copy of that from the Library of Congress that is difficult to find, and it is titled A Declaration. The Declaration of Independence is actually a styles issue. I learned that from someone that I do respect, and he's the one that brought that up. And when you go look up what a styles issue is, that is just how they name a document for clarification. It doesn't mean that is the name of the document. So Congress, one of the first laws they passed was a law to publish 200 copies of a declaration. Now, in its simplest terms, the Declaration of Independence is a contract. Okay, now the contract with who? There's multiple parties involved. Under the organic documents, you have the Declaration of Independence, 1776, the Articles of Confederation, 1777. You have the Treaty of Paris, 1783, the Northwest Ordinance, 1787, and the Constitution, 1789. That is all the documents, the foundational documents that created the federal government. It didn't create the states. What created the states was the Treaty of Paris, 1783. Before that, they were colonies. Okay. So when you realize that The states have citizens. Now, this goes back before the 14th Amendment. People say, well, the 14th Amendment changed everything. Not necessarily. Go back to Chisholm v. Georgia. The
Right. Yeah.
state is an artificial person under Chisholm v. Georgia. Well, the 14th Amendment made all artificial persons citizens of the United States. So that means the state at one level is a U.S. citizen. So if you read the slaughterhouse cases, U.S. versus Anthony, a lot of people don't realize the court case involving Susan B. Anthony, I think it's 1872, maybe 1873, something like that. The judge goes on a teaching rant and does a beautiful explanation of the two different citizenships. Okay. The reason she went to jail wasn't because she wasn't a U.S. citizen or was. The reason she went to jail is her nationality was a New Yorker, and she voted in a foreign jurisdiction's elections called the United States. And she didn't have authority to do that because she was not a U.S. citizen. Now, let's go back to the foundation. Chisholm v. Georgia says that, the people of the state are sovereign. People don't like, again, government don't necessarily like that term, but the sovereigns of the state they elected representatives. And they said, hey, go do this for us. The representatives then appointed, delegation of powers doctrine, delegates. And the delegates contracted through the authority of the representatives and the federal government what was called the federal government. The states are sovereign countries, aka the 10th Amendment. The federal government is a foreign jurisdiction to the states. Each state is a foreign jurisdiction to the other states. So if you believe you are a U.S. citizen, they won't tell you no different. I mean, First Amendment is first for a reason. They'll protect your beliefs even if your beliefs are wrong. You see what I'm saying? So in the governmental styles manual, on page 109 of the PDF, it is page 95 of the book, it goes over nationalities. Are you a North Carolinian, a Texan, a Virginian, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? What is a nationality for? What country are you from? The United States is not a country. The United States is a nation in and of itself. So if you were not a party to the contract, why are you running around saying you were a U.S. citizen? You the man, you the woman.
Well, I think it's a point of confusion.
It is. They think because they filled out a piece of paper and checked a box U.S. citizen and they put a name and a number on it that that's them. It's not them. See, the Declaration is actually a trust indenture. Now look at the last paragraph. It tells you what they put into the trust: their life, fortunes, honor, everything. And what did they put it into the trust for? For the benefit of the United States. So by all intents and purposes, it's a trust indenture. And then the Constitution is the rules the trustees have to follow.
So then would the trustees be the public officials?
Yeah, it'll be Congress. I mean, you can go on to C-SPAN and find a video of Congressman Trafficant where he says they are the trustees. That was in 1993.
And then is the beneficiaries our persons, or is it the flesh and blood man and woman?
No, it's the state. It's the states.
So the states. So they are persons as well, right?
Yeah, because who created the federal government? The representatives, who represent what? The state as a whole. I don't remember the court case, but I can easily find it.
Right.
Where
So
it
they're
said that,
essentially agents for the states.
yes. So I found a court case that said that the founders never envisioned we, the people of the United States, to encompass everyone. They didn't. That's why there's a court case called Barron versus City of Baltimore. In Berrien versus City of Baltimore, this guy sues under the Fifth Amendment for taking his property without just compensation or under eminent domain. And the basic layman's summary was that you're not a party. That they have no jurisdiction to stop it. The state of Maryland has the right to do that, and you are not a party to the contract between of the federal constitution. So that he didn't have that right at the state level. That was a limitation on the federal government to not do those things. The state has its own constitution, and that's where your power lies.
I see. So we then you saying the flesh and blood man and woman are the beneficiaries of the state constitution.
Correct. The states are the beneficiaries of the federal.
Well, that certainly makes sense. What about the
The parties to
relationship?
the contract, the parties to the contract is how things line up. Was every single person that was considered a citizen of one of the states a party to the contract? No. Now, a lot of people will disagree with me on this, and it creates a lot of contention in the communities. But I look at things simple. I look at things as they are based on their words, because you cannot dispute their words. And the Bible says what? It gives an example. I think it was talking to Peter, where it says, hey, your words betray you.
So, what are the implications of this in terms of engaging in the legal system and the commerce system?
Well, let's handle the commerce thing first. People have this misconception that commerce is this something evil. No, it's not. Go read the book of Leviticus, go read the book of Proverbs. Commerce is nothing more but how people do business. Okay. That's why you have three levels to commerce. You have private commerce, like how me and you personally do business as men and women to each other. Then you have quasi public private commerce, and then you have public commerce. The latter two, in part or in full, the federal government has the right to regulate it. Um, for example, you've got you want to open up a restaurant. Okay. People say, well, the government can't mess with my stuff. It's my right. No, not entirely. If you're going to start a lawn care service, yeah, you can start that without a business license. You have the right to earn a living and provide for your family, because that right there doesn't get into other doctrines like the public health doctrine. But if you're going to open up a restaurant, the government has a right to set regulations in place for that to protect public health. Because why do you? Because back in the day, what happened? There were restaurants out there where people would do what? They would eat there and get food poisoning. And the government has a duty to protect the people in mass. That's why you've got certain types of business that have to be regulated, like plumbing. Why? That affects the public interest.
But isn't there already remedy available without regulation? One is by simply word of mouth and reputation of the service provider or the business, and then also remedy within the courts for
There
negligence
is
or other torts.
there is remedy, yes, but do the corporations typically follow the natural law? No. Remember, back in the day, we had child labor. So what did the federal government get forced to do? Put a stop to child labor. You see what I'm saying? Because corporations don't have inalienable rights. Only men and women have inalienable rights. The corporation doesn't. Okay. So the government has certain duties to protect. Doesn't it say that the role of government is to secure your rights and interests? Well, how did they secure it? They put everything in trust. So there is a need for government. People say that government is a concept of man. No, it's not. The Bible says that God instituted government. and it does in Romans 13. But is Romans 13 the only place it talks about that? No. I read Psalms 82 again. I go back to Psalms 82. Psalms 82, he tells what the purpose of the governmental system was. And yes, you go into the Old Testament and, well, man asked for a king. Yes, Israel did ask for a king. And God said, hey, you don't want this. Here's why. But the people said, we want to be like other nations. Where did those other nations get their authority? Because that's where you read Psalms 82 and you understand what happened in Genesis 11. Genesis 11 is the table of nations. That's when man was disobedient to God, and they said, hey, let's build a tower into heaven and make a name for ourselves. And God said, I told you to go have dominion over the whole earth. But man didn't want to do that. They said, no, we're gonna sit right here, lest we die. And God said, no. So God created the nations. And then Psalms 82 explains the rules that government was supposed to follow. Well, guess what? The government didn't follow it because he placed the angels over the nations. Okay. And he said, hey, go help the widow, go help the poor, the fatherless, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they didn't follow it. Stop, Luna. Stop. 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 Nobody's going to eat you. So I didn't follow it. So what? Now, hold on one second. So when you follow that, he told the angels or the lesser gods, and we see that as evidence in all the other cultures. In India has they've estimates that India has over 3,000 gods. You see the gods of China, you see the gods of Saudi Arabia, you see the gods of Israel, et cetera, et cetera. There is no such thing as separation of church and state. Uh, the only thing, because every single culture developed their government based on a belief system. You cannot you cannot differentiate a belief system and government. You can't, because why? Even the atheists have a religious system. They believe there is no God, and they base their beliefs and how things operate based on those beliefs.
Right, and perhaps scientism is their form of religion. Um,
And materialism is actually the proper term because they say material is all there is.
Correct, and the modern scientism is based upon materialism and reductionism. So it's all
Yes,
consistent with that philosophy, right? Which also is related to nihilism. But what I
yes,
wanted to, so what you're saying then is that government, in the way that it was conceived of and endowed by God, is beneficent to help ensure, fairness, and that the vulnerable members of the population are provided for. But in
yes.
actuality, it's been corrupted by,
Well, no, it hasn't been corrupted. It was corrupted because why? Lucifer fell. And he,
nevertheless,
yeah, him and his angels were the gods of the world. And because they're in disobedience to God, they're rebelling against God. Guess what? The
and
people follow suit because why? Part of man is exceedingly wicked. Who can know it? Because man follows suit to their gods.
and so that's how the corruption came to be that's present in the current governments of the world.
Yes.
And how can we interact with that system without being victimized by the corruption?
I saw a video by Michael Heiser. Michael Heiser he was one of the leading experts out there on the biblical languages. Okay. And I saw one of his videos one day where he said that The Bible is really just a tale of a war between two kingdoms. Okay. And that means what? If it's two kingdoms, each of those kingdoms have certain rights, duties, and responsibilities to their people, right?
Correct.
So when you look at what the Bible teaches from that standpoint, and when, Jesus looked at the Pharisees, what did he tell them? He said, "You are of your father, the devil." See, people have the misconception that every single one of us out here are children of God. Well, that's not entirely true. We are children of a God. The question is which one? Well, Jehovah created all this. Well, that may be true. That doesn't mean you're the children of Him. Okay. Because how could the Pharisees be of their father, the devil? And then because of the blood of Christ, he said that what? You are adopted into the family of God. Well, adoption is a legal term. What are you doing? You're changing families.
Very interesting.
So what do? You have to learn how to think differently. In other words, through the first Adam, sin entered the world. That created the family line, right? That's the surname. And what is the role of government? To regulate the wicked. So through the first, now, like I was saying, through the first Adam, sin entered into the world, right? That means which family are you of? And if God instituted government, what did he institute it for? Well, it says in the book of Romans, he instituted government to do what? Punish the wicked. We are our own worst enemy. Why are we our own worst enemy? Because we profess ourselves to be the wicked by our own words. A lot of things we say out there is not based in truth. It's based on hearsay. It is not based on firsthand knowledge. The only way you can tell the truth is with firsthand knowledge. And what do they call that? They call it personal knowledge. But people don't know how to differentiate personal knowledge from hearsay. They think just because I read it or told it, I know it, that it is personal knowledge. If you've been read it or told it, it's hearsay. You
This
did
is
not experience for yourself that information.
this is one of the
So
big problems in science as well, is that this type of observation is ignored, and just simply hearing others make claims is enough to accept things as fact for most people. Let me just add that what you were saying about the necessity to regulate the wicked reminded me of the 1933 Emergency Acts, which applied the Trading with the Enemies Act toward the general citizenry of the United States. And I'm not sure if that was perhaps directed specifically at the states, but nevertheless, it illustrates the regulating of the wicked by issuing licenses and other such regulations that were necessitated because of their being essentially enemy combatants
it
until
well,
presumed otherwise.
to answer your question about being pointed towards the states, depends on your application. Was it to the men and women? No. They don't have any jurisdiction over God's world. They only have a jurisdiction over their world. Okay. So if you are going to play the part and be in their world and create joinder by your words, then yes, they can treat you as an enemy.
So it sounds
But
like
who
all
does
of
it
this.
actually play with? It plays with the fiction world. The state is part of the fiction world. It's an artificial person.
So this is kind of like a form of identity or role confusion here, where we create joinder, right, pretending to be something that we're not, and get caught up in these systems, which seem to violate our rights. However, it's our own wicked behavior, perhaps, that leads us astray. So, can you expand upon this and what uh, our true godly role is and how we can exercise that.
Well, in Joshua 1:8, it says, "This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate herein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success." But pay attention to what was before that. Let's see. Speaking to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses, minister, said, "Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, and all this people unto the land I do give them. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you," said Moses, from the wilderness. Let's see. So he says, look, God gave us this law. What do they call it? In his days, that's the statutes and codes of their day. What is Leviticus? Statutes and codes. People say, well, statutes and codes are not law. Really? Show me evidence. It's actually evidence of a law. It may not be the law itself, but it is evidence that there is a law, because all the statutes and codes are based on principles. Yes, they codified murder. Okay, they put, where does that principle come from? The Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill. The proper term is thou shalt not commit murder. Okay, so the church taught this to mean, oh, you study the Bible and the Bible alone, that's the law, blah, blah, blah. No. What are the statutes and codes of our day? What is the law? Okay. Wherefore, the law was our schoolmaster. What is a schoolmaster? A teacher to bring us unto Christ. Because why? The schoolmaster is teaching you of your sin. Because the only thing government can regulate is sin. This is why they pass laws all the time regulating morality. The only thing that can be licensed is sinful acts. Because why? Sin goes against God. What is a license in law? A license is a permission to do something that is illegal. Well, if God is the ultimate lawgiver, to not follow his law would be an illegal act, right?
Yes, and I've often described a license to practice medicine in that respect, because you're allowed to essentially assault and poison people with permission from the state,
Yes,
which are illegal acts.
yes, but the thing you're not seeing is the government has a right to regulate medicine, because why?
Well,
It
because
affects the people at large.
so it's like a custodial duty.
Yes. The problem is, you brought up the medical license. Obamacare was passed. Right? I know that's not the proper term, but you know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
And people run around saying, I have a right to health care. Yay, they passed this law. Yes, you have a right to take care of yourself. You do not have a right for government to provide you health care. That is a privilege. See,
Yes.
people don't even know the difference between rights and privileges.
Well, I mean, a privilege is granted, right, based on some kind of contract or quid pro quo, whereas a right is absolute.
Yes. And a right is absolute. Yes. And well, it's a limited absolute. Inalienable rights, yes, those are quite, we'll just say absolute up to a point.
Right. Well, I mean,
Okay.
the boundary is that it can infringe upon the other's equal right.
Correct. That's the boundary, because no one's above the law. Okay. I don't remember who it was, one of the guys in the early days, but he was walked out on stage explaining to the people what rights were. And he walks out on the stage flailing his arms. He said, look, I have the right to flail my arms and look stupid and do this. But my rights end where your nose begins. Because me flailing my arms is a right. But the minute me flailing my arms connects with your nose, my rights have ended and yours kick in because now I have assaulted you.
I'm pretty sure I've seen that demonstration, but I can't recall the purveyor.
Yeah, it was a long time ago before the TV. Somebody else probably did a presentation similar based on that.
Right. I mean, it almost sounds like something George Carlin would do, but I don't think that's what
Yeah.
it was.
So we have there's a some people have heard the term clerk's praxis, and it's not a proper term. This book is actually easy to find online. It's called The Practice and Jurisdiction of the Courts of Admiralty in three parts. Okay. I bring this book up because this book was written by an attorney in 1809. See, attorneys are not always bad. Some of them are. In every single system, you have the yin and the yang. You have the good and you have the bad. In government, you have good people working in government. You have bad people working in government. Okay. You don't know the heart of the person. So in this book, one of the things he said is there was a war between the admiralty and the common law. Okay. In the back in those days, the common law won. As in, when we say a war between the admiralty and the common law, we're talking about the common law courts and the admiralty courts. So back then, the common law courts won, and one of the number one reasons why the common law courts won was because the people knew the law and they knew their rights. What do people not know today?
The
They don't
law
know the
or their
law
rights.
nor their rights.
We
Things
saw
they
that
think are,
demonstrated during the past 3 years very clearly.
yeah, people think they know what rights are, but they're confusing rights with privileges. If follow the logic of this phrase, inalienable rights come from the creator. Everybody says yes, there are God-given rights. So when you start talking about rights, you have to start talking about which God. Because why? If you got the creator giving you your rights, why do people run around saying they're violating my civil rights? Because what God gives, God can take away. Who creates civil rights?
Right. The civil
Government.
body, yes. And the same thing with human rights.
Yeah. So when government is creating rights, then you, by saying, hey, you're violating my civil rights, you're saying, hey, God, you violated my rights. Well, if they created it, they can take it away. So let's see here.
And that's how we can be incarcerated. And, this is um, even more
Well,
pronounced for people who join the military services because of
that,
the
well,
agreements they make.
yes, but the reason we can be incarcerated, there was a Supreme Court justice, don't ask me which one, that said everybody in federal prison volunteered to be there. And a lot of people misunderstand the context of what he was saying. They say, oh, yeah, they volunteered because they broke a law. No, they volunteered because they didn't know how the system works.
That's correct.
So now, this document, what y'all are seeing is my file section in Telegram. Anybody watching this video. So this right here, the doctrine of constitutional avoidance, a legal overview. Now, and anybody can find these documents. A lot of them are online, free to download. So you got the Ashwander doctrine. Let's go down here to rule number 6. These are the 7 rules of Ashwander. Okay. Rule number 6. The court will not pass upon the constitutionality of a statute at the instance of one who has availed himself of its benefits. What is that? That's a contract terminology. People are
right.
running around talking about the driver's license and the right to travel. And they're wondering why they're getting in trouble. You chose at the age of 16 to get a license and you signed a contract. Well, if you signed a contract, you need to be honorable and honor your contract. But guess what they've never done? They've never undid the contract correctly.
So
See what I'm saying?
this is the same story if we talk about the Second Amendment. Correct that if you subject yourself to licensure or background check, that you're essentially agreeing to all the regulations put forth about your, through the Second Amendment rather than your actual rights of self-defense, etc.
Well, let's analyze the Second Amendment. People are running around saying, "Oh, they're trying to take away our guns." No, they're not. Well, how is that? They're passing all these laws. You don't understand the system, is what I tell people. I said, think about it. Go through the federal gun laws. Guns right around 1890 ish and before, even a convicted felon can have them if their paperwork is in order and they're protected by the Second Amendment. Okay. I found court cases that say this, but their paperwork has to be in order, showing evidence that it is an antique weapon, right? So they hide the Second Amendment under terminology like that. Then you got this thing called ghost guns. What are those? Guns made in the privacy of your home. Well, arms. Let's use the proper
Right now,
term.
this is when you
Arms
buy
made in
like
the privacy of your home.
a blank lower receiver and then you machine it so that it can actually be a functional firearm.
Or you make all the parts yourself because you
Right,
know
you
how to
could
do
make
it.
it right from scratch, a variety
Yeah.
of ways, right? A CNC machine,
Yes.
etc.
Yes. So what happened between 1890 and ghost guns? We allowed the corporations to make the weapons. What did that do? That placed them into commerce. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 now applies. It's a commerce clause. Okay. Let's see here. Yusuf El says it a lot on high frequency radio about everything is in commerce. And a lot of attorneys fight back. No, it's not. No, it's not. Really? Count two. Fourth, the possession of the firearm charged in count two of the information was in or affecting commerce. The firearm listed in count two of the information knowingly possessed by the defendant on May 25th, 2022 was not manufactured in New York and therefore moved in or affected commerce at some point prior to the defendant's possession. Why do you think they got serial numbers on them? They can track where they were manufactured and where they went and how they got there. And if it crossed that state line, it went into commerce.
It doesn't have to cross the state line to go into commerce, though, correct?
That is one of the number one things it has to do.
I mean, if it passes through a licensed firearm dealer, then it enters commerce, right?
Because it came from another state, they had to order it. Remember,
No,
it was
well,
shipped in.
what if it's manufactured in the same state, but then is for sale at a licensed, gun dealer? Wouldn't that bring into commerce because of the license?
Yes, the licensor would.
So if though something was manufactured by a private individual and then sold privately, like through a personal contact, then that would not be subject to any of the regulations, correct? Because it would not be in commerce.
That depends. If you really want to talk to an expert on that, you need to talk to Dan in my group.
Well, let's say that you manufactured it for yourself.
Now, that right there, yes, there's actually a court case that is very difficult to get. And I don't disclose that one publicly. I will talk about it privately because I know where to get the case, all the files, and I don't want them to move it before I get all the files. Okay, so, but there was a guy in California was a convicted felon, and he made the arms in his home. California arrested him for possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. He fought it all the way to high as he could go. In the highest court, I don't remember if it was the U.S. Supreme Court or the state Supreme Court. Don't really remember. I'd have to go back and look. But they said, give him his stuff back. He proved in court it never entered commerce. So they had no jurisdiction.
Wow, that's pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm.
These days, it's much easier to do this yourself.
Yes. So we went over a lot of things there, and I know you originally talked to me about the stuff I teach, and it's not really a change of subject, but let's go back to sovereignty. Okay.
Okay.
People run around and say sovereignty. Sovereignty truly is agency. Because why? Go back to the Bible. God owns it all. Okay. If you believe God owns it, and I tell Christians this, yes, yes, it does say God owns it all. I do believe that. But then you turn around and want to own your house. Which one is it? You can't have two owners necessarily.
Well, this is
So
the debate about property ownership at a fundamental
yes.
level that
Well, if
often comes up.
well, the reason government has that ownership is within the state is because God instituted government to protect God's system. Satan is doing his job, whether you like it or not. He's doing his job.
Right. Now we also have the papal bulls, right, like Unum Sanctum, claiming ownership as well.
Go read the book of Job. God, the devil could do nothing to Job without God's permission, right? Do you think that's changed because it's now you? No. He still has to get God's permission. Okay. So now let's look at since the role of government is to protect the rights, is to secure the rights of the people and to protect God's property. You are sitting around trying to own property that you don't have a right to own. You have a privilege to own. Okay. This is why they go into property tax. Yeah, they put it up as commercial property. That may be true, but but Senate Report 43 says ownership of property is within the state. Why? The state is literally the person that purchased the property. You just didn't realize it. Why? You're using their documents to purchase everything.
So this is why they won't allow you to use gold or silver to purchase it.
I don't get into the gold and silver argument because why? What is just people say there is no money because they took away the gold and silver. Really? You don't even understand what money is if that's the case. I mean, who decided gold and silver had value? Because according to the Bible, gold is pavement. Pavement don't have value.
Well, it does if you have a car.
Well, yeah, but it doesn't have any value in and of itself. What you gonna go tear up your freshly paved driveway and go use it to purchase something? It has no value because why? Other party to the contract doesn't agree that it has value. See, at one time in history, we used seats. There was places that used seashells for money. Who decided seashells had value? The parties to
Right.
the contract.
Right. Also, tulip bulbs and many other items of barter.
Yes. So we're still doing the same thing. The monetary system's never changed. All they did was say, "Hey, we can now use paper," which go back in history, the colonists started out using paper, using promissory notes and bills of exchange. You can go to Google and type in promissory notes in under the in the states, and you will find old pictures of promissory notes created by people in the states back in the early days. Ain't nothing changed. The difference is the government in 1933 securitized them. And they said, look, we'll make it our obligation. Why? Because God promised to provide for our necessaries. And then the government turned around and codified that in the Federal Emergency Relief Act of what was it? May 12th, 1933.
I'm sure on the year, not the specific day. There were a number of acts passed once FDR was inaugurated. But
No, that was when they codified the necessities. May 12th, 1933. That's when the Federal Emergency Relief Act was passed, which it was the precursor to Social Security.
right.
Social Security was passed in 35.
So what we're missing then is that we are one, not the owner of the property, right? And I think we can also get into not the owner of that surname. And that also we are not actually um, realizing the benefits that we have and also the lack of liability as not being owners, right? Because, for example, if we look at how the super wealthy protect their property, right, is that they make sure that they have no liability in it by putting it into a separate trust or a shell company to protect them from any liability. And
Well,
we're conflating our identity and assuming some of these things that we don't really have to do. We're supposed to receive the benefits.
correct. Now, this right here is the congressional record, March 9th, 1933. Right here. This is page 2. Under the Federal Reserve Act, obligations, whose obligations? That are deposited as the security in gold for reserve notes are placed in the hands of the Federal Reserve agent. Wait a minute. They didn't get rid of gold. They redefined what gold was. They made the securities and obligations of the United States the new gold. So my question is this, did they really get rid of gold? No. Everybody
Well,
understands proper grammar.
there is one difference. It used to be that you could take a Federal Reserve note to the Treasury and they would exchange it for gold, and they stopped doing that.
Physical gold.
Yeah,
And what
physical
would
gold.
that now follow the operation of law? What would that be to this steel? That would be called equal exchange.
Well, I know
You
they still
had
perform an
gold,
exchange, but if you
you
held the
had
go
yeah,
ahead.
but think about it. You had the security in gold, so they made the notes the gold, right? So what are you actually doing when you take the gold note to the treasury, you get the metal gold. It's an equal exchange. That's all it is.
I give that to you, but nevertheless, there's still a material difference,
Yeah, because the physical metal gold, one is the gold under the law.
right? So all I'm
Now,
saying is that but not only for that to be changed, but also the way to fulfill the obligations of a note, right? Didn't it require to be settled in gold, whereas now it's
that
settled
was
in paper?
that was physical gold. The Coinage Act was dealing with physical gold, as in metal.
Correct.
So what did they do with the Banking Relief Act? They changed it from the metal called gold to the paper called gold.
Right. But the paper is much easier to acquire. Like you
It
don't
is
have
much
to.
easier to acquire because why? Article 1, Section 10, the contract clause. Everyone has the fundamental right to contract.
Are you referring to the gold clause or
No,
the
contract
definition of legal
clause.
tender?
No, the contract clause, Article 1, Section 10.
Okay.
Now, look at this. Now, that section I read earlier, that was codified in 12 USC 411. Now, look here. See right here where it says under, right here? Under the new law, the money is issued to the banks. You notice it says money, singular. It's issued to the banks in return for government obligations. There's those obligations. Bills of exchange, drafts, notes, trade acceptances, and bankers' acceptances. They codified that in 12 USC 412.
Right. Yes.
The money
Section
will be
16.
worth 100 cents on the dollar. It doesn't say dollars. Okay. Because it is backed by what? It is backed by the credit of the nation. How did they back it by the credit of the nation? They put everything in trust, remember? It will represent a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people of the nation. So they mortgaged all the homes. That makes them the owner and you the manager or the agent. But you've been working for free. What is other property? What is property?
So are you saying that they are the mortgagee?
Yes, they're the ones that own all the homes. That's
So
why they're
they hold
insured under the USDA.
they hold title.
Yes, ownership was within the state. Senate Report 43. Now, look, right here, general definition of property. The legal definition of property most often refers not to a particular physical object, but rather, so if it doesn't apply to a physical object, that would be the home, but rather to the legal bundle of rights recognized in that object, which bundle of rights includes the right to possess, use, dispose of a particular article. The term property embodies more than just physical corporal assets. It can include intangible entities such as rights and interest.
So that's
So you
what I was
got that
referring to as
home.
title,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
title is
Rights in it.
often
Yeah.
it's the bundle of rights or documents that represent the ownership of those rights.
But does that mean others don't have rights?
Of course not. And it also, if you have rights, doesn't mean you can't grant permission to give those rights to others as well.
Correct. So
So this is where eminent domain comes from, obviously.
that is part of it. Yes. They have to compensate you because why? Your rights and interests. Does that mean you're the only party that has the rights and interests? No, not necessarily.
So, what is the nature of the rights and interests that we have if we're not the true owner of any property? And how do we make sure that we are able to exert those rights successfully?
Well, go back to what I was talking about earlier, agency. First, you got to understand some of these concepts. What is a state? And I ask this question to people, and I know I've talked to you about it. I know you already know, and I'm preaching to the choir here. But what is a state? A state is a stack of papers with agreed upon terms and conditions called a constitution. In other words, it's a contract between the people of the state and its representatives. So, can that contract do anything on its own volition? No. You have to have men and women step into those offices and act as agents, right?
You mean to represent the state, the
This,
corporate side?
no, the period. Go back to the original Constitution of the state, 17, whatever. Okay. It is still a stack of papers with an agreed upon border and agreed upon terms and conditions. Can that stack of papers do anything on its own?
Well, no. I'm referring to the contract, right? It's between the state and then the people's corporate entities, right?
The corporate entities, no, it's the people of the state are sovereign. Okay.
Okay, so
Remember,
then
that's what Chisholm
they
v. Georgia said.
right.
They said, hey, be our representatives.
So then the people don't need agents. The state needs the agents.
Only in the public do you need agents. Public and private do not mix. The man and woman is in the private. The minute you go into the fiction world, you have to operate an agency.
So if you're operating essentially with the state in any way, including with any licensed or regulated entity of the state, then you're in the public.
Yes, because why? Everything started changing in during Lincoln. He passed the 14th Amendment. He made all those artificial persons, states, U.S. citizens. They passed the Act of 1871, and a lot of people in the movement say, "Oh, it was treason." No, it's not. They're allowed to do that. They can create corporations. I got court cases pre 1871 that says the government has the right to do business and create a a corporate entity. That falls under the contract clause. See, a lot of times we talk about how the government is violating our rights, but we don't understand they have certain rights too, because how did they get their rights? Through us.
Right. So let me kind of break this down for the audience a little bit because I know exactly where you're going with this, but So when we interact with the system of commerce or the legal system of statutes and codes, we are not doing it as a man or woman. We're doing it through our corporation that was set up for us.
Yeah,
And we are acting as an agent of that corporation, but we often accidentally or through our ignorance or nescience act as if we are that corporate entity, not
correct,
realizing that we're separate, right? And that's what gets us in trouble and obligated to things that we didn't intend to be, and we aren't actually supposed to be.
correct. Go back to what I said about the Fourth Amendment, the right of the people, that's the men and women, to be secure in their persons, the legal fiction.
Right. And so when this trust was established, right, by the government mortgaging all of the homes and property, right, which was led to the establishment of the Social Security Trust, which houses all of that property, right, in its res, that we, through our Social Security number, right, that is the account number of our person, our corporate fiction, or our stack of papers that we can represent as agents. And if we do it properly, we don't incur any of the liability, but we have the authority to enter into contracts, to use credit, to complete transactions in commerce, and that if we do a good job of that, we may be even granted even further privileges to operate
Yes, correct.
our persons.
Yeah, correct. So, and it's not really our denotes ownership. Okay. That's why I'm very particular on the language. When you
Right.
say my name, our
Well,
entity,
what
see what I'm saying?
what's
So I
confusing
say
about it is because we think about that name as being our name, right? And but
correct.
the truth is that we only have hearsay evidence that that name belongs to us in any way.
Well, and it's deeper than just hearsay evidence. Um, People will say, but my mother gave me that name. Did she? I had a conversation with a top level attorney that's now retired in my home state. His name is Mike Slosser. And I was breaking some of this down to him, and he's learned to respect what I say. And he said, "Tell me how you're getting this." In other words, he wants to see the logic of it. I said, for one, the mother goes and signs a contract. Let's see here, approximately 6 or 8 months before the birth event ever happens. Okay,
Now, is this the
so
consent for prenatal care?
yeah, during the prenatal visit, which means she is contracting with the hospital because why? The prenatal department is just a branch of the hospital.
Now,
I've
I've
got a,
seen these
yeah,
consent agreements, and they essentially award guardianship of the newborn to the hospital,
not the baby, only
not the
the
baby,
infant.
the infant. Correct.
Yeah. Right here, authorization and assignment. I do hereby voluntary consent to medical care. In other words, all voluntary medical care at Christ Community Health Services. We discovered this in Tennessee probably 5 years ago. And at that time, I still hadn't put two and two completely together. I still was at that time thinking it had to do with the baby. And what does it say in all capital letters? This authorization and assignment is a permanent one-time signature which will remain on file and will be used for further claims. I may revoke it at any time by written notice. Well, here's the problem. Most people don't keep their contracts. So even if you try to go revoke it now, you have no evidence of that contract to base it on and say, hey, on page 3, the authorization and assignment section says that I can revoke it. So here's my revocation. Because now you have evidence to back up your claim. Okay.
Yeah, I would revoke it right on that, right on the page, right there, before signing it.
I personally, I don't know that I would. You know why? It's set up, the system is set up beautifully designed. When you know it's not about you and it's about something else, okay? Now, people that are watching, they're saying, but yeah, they're still holding on to that mother gave me that name. Cancel, links, search.
Well, listen, I had a slightly different reason because on there it also essentially gives away your authority to make individual healthcare decisions about specific treatments or
Only
diagnostic
revolving
results.
around the infant, not the man or woman.
Well, it does in a general consent form that an adult would sign. And I believe it said in
Ah,
there for the prenatal care
okay, for the prenatal care of what?
of the
That's the
mother.
problem. Again, the prenatal care of what? The mother is legally incompetent. This is one of the things I talked to Mike about. I said, think about it. The mother is in a medical situation because she's pregnant. She's also under the care of another. And the average woman legally is incompetent during the whole process. Because why? She's under the care of another. Okay. And it usually asks any woman, when do you get fully recovered? Typically 1, 2, 3 months after the event. Okay. That's when she's released. Right. But look, it's not about the baby. It's legal hats. Okay. So let's see here. This is on the CDC website. We've also found it in the federal laws. This term live birth, I'll tell you what, before I go over this, let's go back to the files section. Right here, born alive test. Because see, there's three terms: live, comma, birth, comma, and live birth. A medico-legal study. This was written in 1904. And yes, it may have been in England, but the principles still came here. Okay. Harvard did a review on this book, showing that pay attention to definition number two, a showing that an infant at the time of birth was capable of living a separate and independent existence, regardless of how long the infant actually lived. This test was first announced in Bombres versus Coates, and that was in 1946. Now we have to say, okay, what is the infant and was it living? Okay. Now let's go to New York. Now you got that context. You see live birth. Live birth is defined as the complete expulsion or extraction from its mother of a product of conception. So we already know there's a product of conception, irrespective of the duration of pregnancy, which after such separation breathes or shows any other evidence of life, such as beating of the heart. Well, there's the baby.
Mm-hmm.
Pulsation of the umbilical cord. That's self explanatory.
That
Or
comes from the
definite
mother.
movement of voluntary muscles. That would be the placenta. Whether or not the umbilical cord has been cut or the placenta is attached. That's the definition of live birth right there. But what does it say after that? Each product of such a birth is considered live born. How many products were there?
Well, they mentioned three:
That's
the,
right.
the umbilical cord, the placenta, and the product of conception.
No, the product of conception is all three products: the
That's all
umbilical
three.
cord, the placenta, and the baby. Okay,
Uh,
now,
that's not that's not medically accurate.
yes, it is. It is medically accurate. They're all products of conception. Why? They don't get created on their own. All they did was separate the three
I see. I
products.
see. Okay, so you're saying the placenta didn't develop until after conception occurred, and neither did the
Right.
cord. Okay, I see what you're
And
saying.
neither did the baby. And neither did the baby. Now, look right here. This is my footprint documents. Okay. Look right here. This was the firstborn infant to this type O Rh positive mother whose expected date of confinement. Wait a minute. Confinement?
Yes, that when she was in the hospital to
920.
deliver, right?
Yeah, that's right. Or projected date of confinement. What gets confined? An inmate. And if you look up the legal definition of inmate, it actually says someone that's in prison or in a healthcare facility. And if you go down to the fourth definition, it says he was found to have a birth weight of 5 pounds, blah, 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 blah. The infant, the foundling, okay? Now, let's go all the way down here to the end, right here. I certify that during the discharge procedure, I received my baby. You notice it doesn't say infant? Language matters in law. The reason why they didn't say infant, the infant and the baby is not the same. And I've asked women this in my group. I said, do you have your hospital file with the footprints on it? Not the pretty decorative document. They said, yeah. I said, would you go get it? Oh, give me a minute. They come back. I said, now tell me something. Does it have the name on top of the document that you thought you was naming your baby? No. So you're sitting there thinking it's about you, the man, and it's not. So the mother receives the baby and takes the baby home, but what does she typically leave at the hospital?
The cord and the
Other two
placenta.
products.
So the infant is all three, and the baby is just the baby.
No, the infant is the two umbilical cord in the placenta.
I see.
The baby is the third product.
I see.
So the baby goes home with the mother and father, but guess what? Follow the operation of law. The mother give an assignment to the hospital over the infant, the baby, right? I've got a video on my YouTube channel where I had a conversation with Vital Records. And Vital Records said, when I asked them about the probate file, she said, yes, the probate file was created, but we can't discuss our internal policy. Why? Go back to the born alive test. The infant did die. It was alive when it came out. The umbilical cord and the placenta was alive. Was it? Wasn't it?
Yes.
Or wasn't it? Yeah. But did it die within a couple hours?
Yes, it did.
So the infant died. So it now was placed into probate, because when a person dies, what happens? And I specifically said person for a reason.
Well, the assets of the person go into probate.
That's right. That's why the probate courts are there.
Provided they weren't accounted for in advance.
Correct. So you have a probate file. That means what? Everything was placed into trust. The state become the grantor because why? The mother voluntarily gave the infant to the hospital. The hospital can't own it. It gets transferred to the state. The state then creates the bank account called Social Security. The trustees are on the website, and the state's the beneficiary of that trust. You are not. At least not yet. Got a video where they say that online.
Now, just to clarify, I think it's important for people to understand that the parent, either acting, independently or as agent for the baby, are not the grantors of this trust. And
the mother is not the grantor? No. Because why?
Well, I think partly because signing the
she gave assignment. Yes. She gave assignment to the hospital. What is she doing? Okay, I'll show you exactly what's going on.
Let me remind everyone to just review the roles of a trust: grantor, trustee, and beneficiary, so you'll better understand this discussion.
Look right here. This is Kentucky Revised Statute. Information reported by a person who assumes custody of a live-born infant of unknown parentage. Check your state codes. Almost every state, you will never find anything dealing with a birth certificate outside of a foundling, lost infant, something. Because they have no jurisdiction over what the man and woman does, because you can't own people. They outlaw slavery in the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. The person who assumes the custody of a live-born infant, there's that phrase again, live-born, go back to the born alive test. You have live birth, live-born, and born alive. They're synonymous. Of unknown parentage shall report on a form and in a manner prescribed by the state registrar within 5 working days to the Cabinet of Health and Family Services the following information: the date and place of finding, sex and approximate birth date of child. Why? Nobody there is reporting from a standpoint of firsthand knowledge, not even the mother. You'll see why here in a second.
Well, it says of
Name and
unknown parentage, right?
right. So that means what? You're saying the infant. We're not talking about the baby. Okay. Name and address of the person or institution with which the child has been placed for care. There's the assignment that was given.
Right.
You gave the infant to the hospital for care.
So that's guardianship.
Yeah. D, name given to the child by the custodian of the child. Child and infant are synonymous, not baby. So the mother signs the contract. From that point on, she puts on the legal hat of custodian. That same vital records video that I told you about a minute ago on probate file also said what? When I asked, what is the red number on the bottom of the certificate of live birth? She said, well, that's a receipt number. Well, what happens? The mother says, here's the infant. And then when the infant is delivered, you fill out the paperwork. They send you a receipt called the certificate of live birth. Did that have anything to do with the baby? And people will run around and say, well, the placenta wouldn't exist without me. That's irrelevant. It's in the fiction world, it is viewed as three separate and distinct entities.